Chapter 8 Wobb's Coming To Story. Before they emptied out, the inner cities were swarming with desperation-hungry bellies, pinched guts, lousy scalps, dirty necks, and the people who made money off of it all. The alleys grew lean-tos and the shelters made of layers of melting cardboard like hives. The apartments were stuffed to overflowing, and people huddled in the hallways. They made their homes in the stairwells after every room was taken, so that once the elevators were shut off, you had to bribe your way through living rooms and sleeping babies to get to and from your apartment. I lived on the top floor with my mother. She drank. Men came, men left. One day my older brother, Neben, stopped coming home, and it was just the two of us. The two of us and the revolving parade of men with dirty, stiff jeans and bloodied knuckles. Sometimes they came after me, waking me up from my sleep when they tried to jam their rough hands in my pajamas. Sometimes they got more than just a feel before I could fend them off and lock myself in the bathroom. I hated it there. There were more bugs than food in the kitchen, and when they shut off the water first and then the power next, it stunk, and the rats came, braver than the bugs, more invasive than the men. Eventually, after the raid started, someone set fire to the building trying to cook spam over a hall fire, and me and my mom were on the street. I was 10 then, and I watched the military shuttling the cleaner citizens to new settlements and gated communities. We hid in a dumpster we shared with a mute named Freddie when the school staff came for the Indians. Freddie was Malaysian, but he wasn't taking any chances. Freddie's wife had been carried away at the food bank, and she was from Taiwan, but no one believed her. There was good money in snitching on Indians, and people would call it in if a Swedish girl wore a braid in her hair. That's why we stopped going to the food banks. The volunteers called in Indian sightings, and the next thing you knew, a wave of white vans screeched up and off you went, kicking and screaming, watching yourself in the mirrored reflection of their sunglasses, throwing boxes of macaroni and cheese and screaming to some god or a devil or anything in between. We'd heard too many stories about the death camps, the way we were being murdered real slow. One time we were half a block away when they showed up. We watched them carry off an old man and his grandson before we remembered to run. I'll never forget the way that man looked when they tossed his grandson in the back of the van like a bag of rice. I watched his soul fold up on itself like a closing door. The light and the warmth of humanity clapped shut in his eyes because he couldn't protect the one thing that mattered. There was no coming back from that, even if he did manage to walk away later on, which he wouldn't. My mom traded favors for booze since food wasn't really her priority. She might have known by then she might have already known she was dying by then. Anyway, I wonder if you can feel poison in your blood, if your veins feel tighter or your pulse gets thicker somehow. Anyway, I was left to feed myself. I was a runner, and I could go on for hours without having to stop or even slow down. The way a good sprint turns your breath into a low whistle, the way it spring-loads your knees, that was my drink. I was addicted. At first I'd run for the joy of it, but once we ran out of food, I did it in trade. You needed a message brought to your brother on the west side of the city after phone service was cut, I was your messenger. You needed medicine and you weren't well enough to get to the pharmacist, I was your girl. But it wasn't free. You had to put gas in the car if you wanted it to drive. I charged a tin of soup for a short jaunt, a full loaf of bread, and a jar of pasta sauce for a trip any longer than the immediate neighborhood. And business was good. After the phones were cut, cell service was blocked in an effort to persuade the leftovers to either move into new developments or to fuck off and die. It also made it easier to isolate the indigenous and stunt the growth of the community. I was in demand, and for something other than what was under my PJs. I ran for a whole year before they caught me. Not the government assholes, just regular assholes, everyday assholes, the kind of assholes that move around in packs because they're too weak to be alone. They caught me on a bogus run they'd put in, sending a stupid hillbilly-looking Indian hopped up on opiates to commission a run. I'd seen him around enough to nod when he passed me. Sometimes he was with my mother, and I recognized his state well enough not to slow down. Today, though, he came with a job. Easy money, he said, drooling onto the back of his hand. Nothing serious, he lied, handing over danishes in advance as payment. I should have known right then. I was to deliver a sealed envelope to the west side by sundown. I ate 2 danishes right off. They were good, not even 2 days stale. I put the remainder in my backpack. I should have eaten them all then and there. I should have never taken them to begin with. I set off full speed, sucking sugar out of my molars, and just real pleased with myself. I ran down the tracks left in the pot-holed road from the old streetcar line. When I got to the building in the west, there were two guys standing guard out front. They had baseball bats, real ones, not the whittled 2x4s most people carried, and wore sunglasses. I should have never shown them the envelope. I should have thought better about following them inside the double front doors of the old deli when they started laughing. Inside it was cold and mostly empty. There was another guy behind the old counter, wiping down steel surfaces in the front kitchen and serving area. And in the main room, there were a couple of round tables and broken chairs. There was another group of men there, quiet now as I walked past, with my letter held in front of my chest, like it would keep me safe. I followed the guard into the back, all eyes on me, where I found a man with red, kinky hair and a wide nose sitting at a low desk. "So," he said up as he stood up, "you're the runner, eh?" I followed the guard into the back, all eyes on me, where I found a man with red, kinky hair and a wide nose sitting at a low desk. "So," he said as he stood up, "you're the runner, yeah?" I tried to stay hard. "Boy, you're a master of observation." He threw his head back and laughed. His front teeth had been sharpened to points by bone or grinding or evolution, I couldn't be sure, and my legs started to shake. He stood and walked around the desk, sitting on the edge of it directly in front of me, arms across his thick chest. "She's feisty," he remarked to the guard on my left. "I like that," and they chuckled together. "Here's your letter, paid in full. I'll be going now." I extended the letter to him, pushing it against his nylon suit jacket. Wait now, runner. Don't you want to see what's inside?" None of my business," I shrugged, still holding out the envelope he wasn't taking. "Oh, you'll want to stay for this." He finally grabbed it, running a long smooth finger along my hand when he did. The guards moved in tight on either side of me as the redhead took the envelope back to the desk and sat in his taped-up leather chair. He tapped it on his forehead. "You see, runner, I have a new business venture I've been trying to get off the ground. I have this idea that we can provide services where the fair city of Toronto has decided to rescind theirs." He pointed with the envelope to the guards on either side of me and to the door. I turned to see the men from the front room gathered there, watching, waiting. The danishes in my stomach turned to gas and burn. "But," he tore open the end of the envelope and blew inside, "seems like somebody already beat us to it. Nobody wants to pay the prices we've set for our communications excellent on the account of some squaw bitch who'll do it for a tin of food." He turned the envelope upside down and shook it. Nothing came out. Decoy. Fuck. I turned, tried to run, adrenaline kicking into my joints like electricity. The guards looped their big arms in mine and lifted me clean off the ground. The redhead laughed, and the group at the door, they joined in now, making their way into the room, eyes flashing. I kicked and I swore and I swung my trapped limbs so hard my braid whipped at my own eyes, so I closed them. I didn't see when they carried me to the broken freezer, when they locked me in and lined up outside. I only saw for 1 minute when the redhead made his way in first, unzipping his jacket and untying his pants. "Look at me." I opened my eyes. He stood there in the freezer light, brown chest bare, a silver knife in his hand. "You're going to stop your little business, yeah?" I nodded quick, all my bravado gone, breathing so hard my nose burned. "I'm going to make sure of it." He moved fast, too quickly for me to do anything but close my eyes again. I didn't feel the slice, just the wet on my cheek and neck and chest, and then he was pulling off my pants, and then I stopped feeling altogether. Later, I heard I was there for 2 days. 2 days in that freezer, with the lineup replenishing itself every time it ended. And when they let me go, I limped out, holding my stomach, my eye already shriveled. I limped home to my dumpster, to my mother, to Freddie the Malaysian. There was no more running. Instead, I hid. Freddie tried to clean me up and stitch my face, but it was already scarring. I didn't care. Neither did my mom. She started smoking crack, which was plentiful, to replace the booze, which was scarce. She barely moved out of the way of her own piss if she wasn't on the hunt for the next rock. When I could walk, I did. 1 block, then another, then a field, past a line of trees, and into the bush. Gone. And the dick who set up the run? who handed over the danishes and scurried off into the alleyways, that was the man I saw a week ago in the woods. I'm sure of it. Is he coming to take Wob back to the bad guys? I jumped at the small voice behind me, pitched high with terror. Riri had crept into the room. Did those bad guys work with the murderers? And why do they murder us slow? She was on the verge of hysterics, trying to hold back it in the way that she did when she was really scared. God, how long has she been there? What did she hear? And how could I take it back? Oh God, no! Wob was mortified. Holding her hand over her mouth, she slumped down on the couch, shaking her head, eyes closed now. Mig sighed and motioned Riri forward. Come, daughter, time to hear story.